Welcome to the Social Justice Forums. I'm your host, Kibin Alleyne, covering for Darren Jaime. We thank you for joining us. If you are asking the question, what is this show all about? We bring you a forum discussion providing a deeper understanding of the issues and inequities many communities face. From systemic inequalities to pressing social problems, our guests will provide multiple perspectives and insights to help us understand better and address these challenges. We invite you to stay connected with us as the Social Justice Forum starts now. Welcome back. Take a Ride Miami is a heartfelt and poignant cinematic journey venturing beyond the city's glamorous exterior. This heartfelt journey not only uncovers the captivating essence of Miami, but also highlights the pressing challenges faced by its residents, serving as a catalyst for positive change. Now, let's explore this trailer of this compelling film.
When you see my city, you probably think it's palm trees, beaches, and luxury lifestyles. What you don't know is there's a lot of gun violence and bloodshed that run these streets.
Caught in the crossfire, a young woman is shot and killed while at a house party.
The 6-year-old boy was killed Saturday while playing outside in Northwest Miami-Dade.
Mother crossing the yellow police tape to get to the man lying lifeless on the ground.
It's like you almost putting on the face of this horrible community, you know what I'm saying? It's just like a cover-up.
My city in a crisis right now. It's been murders.
Directed to clear and stand by
Police
to assist.
all through the night.
A lot of angry police and local leaders here today fed up with the recent deadly gun violence across Miami-Dade.
Right now while we filming this, you know that on site, you feel what I'm saying?
This is the Economy food store. When police arrived, the victim of several gunshot wounds was found, shot dead.
Rest in peace, King Carter, Blaze Carter, my dog. No remorse for the shooter, hope we get him a morgue.
Edmund Bailey is in critical but stable condition after being shot in the head in his car in Miami Gardens, Florida.
Take a ride through my city. There's blood on these walls. Look around you. We living rough. We gonna show you everything. Nothing to hide.
This ain't no make-believe, this real life.
So are you sure you want to take a ride through my city? The real Miami.
Joining us now is the director of Take a Ride Miami, Anthon Samuel. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Now, we saw the trailer. It was so much going on, and honestly, just from the minute or so that we were watching it, I was definitely like fully pulled in. What inspired you to create, Take a Ride Miami and shed light on the untold stories of the city's residents?
Well, thank you for acknowledging the film. So many things went into the Take a Ride project. First, for myself, is being impacted by gun violence. You learn during the film that I had lost my father to gun violence, and I also had the chance to witness that, which really struck me deep. And then throughout my adolescence, as I was growing up, I lost a lot of childhood friends to gun violence. I'm thankful that I was able to make it out. So just really always been around gun violence and want to stop it. And then what really wanted me to continue the mission, even though I went through all that, on February 20th, there was a kid by the name of King Carter, who was only 6 years old, that was shot and killed. And that really just hit me deeply, because I was used to adults passing away through gun violence because I had came accustomed to it. But when I seen the number of kids that started to die due to gun violence, I just really had to do something to where I can get someone to listen. I can write a book, so those were some things I considered. But when I looked at today's generation, I just kind of thought, what's a channel that I can use to reach out to today's generation?
And, I also want to add on that, when you see it, paired with the music and you see the emotions, because I think when it's a book or if it's written, you can interpret it, maybe how you want to. But when you see it in a movie or, in footage and you see the people affected by it, I think it really kind of adds another layer of emotion to the entire thing. So I definitely first of all, congratulations on actually getting through with this, because I know it can't be easy. You talked about, kind of using your own personal experience to tell this story and, some experiences from other people. Were there any challenges, along the way, having to draw from, really painful memories and, a very traumatizing experience?
Yeah, a few. The key one that I would say that really struck me to my core is during the filming of this film. And actually, if you pay attention to the beginning of the film, there's a kid that's introduced at the beginning of the film who kind of shoots a gun to show you the violence that happens in Miami. We wanted to illustrate that. But getting back to the question that you asked, the most traumatic part was losing my brother to gun violence during this filming, who was a 17-year-old kid. And it just hit me so differently because I was in the community trying to stop gun violence. And in the midst of doing that, it knocked on my front door, and it hadn't did that in a while. So, that definitely was the most traumatizing part of it. And to be honest, that kind of pushed Take a Ride back a little bit because I became defeated and didn't want to continue with it no more. But my brother just came over me and said I needed to finish that. And then other than that, I think what the viewer won't see is the true dangers that we were in while filming this. And, I was accustomed to it because I grew up in that background. But my camera crew that I had, they wasn't as accustomed to it. And, truly understanding that, it could go down where we were at. We were filming real people that was involved with that life. So, that was challenging of it. But I'm just grateful for the team. The co-director, Guillermo, everybody that contributed, that really, kind of locked in and didn't let that kind of deter them from the vision or mission, because it was a very challenging job.
Now, something I really want to highlight is that the film kind of reveals an unseen reality of Miami. When everybody thinks of Miami, they think of vacationing, they think of luxury. And, of course, there are some very beautiful aspects and parts of Miami, but the film really shows this hidden reality or, this underworld or this underside of like what is really happening in Miami. Can you talk a little bit more about how, you really wanted to share some, just some moments of like what so many residents in that city is going through?
Yeah, overall, I would say Miami is a beautiful city. Right, what you see, the beaches and everything. So I don't want to tear it down as Miami is this terrible city. It is a beautiful city, but there is a side to it that a lot of people don't know, and I felt the need to bring awareness to that side. So of course you have Miami, you have the South beaches of the world and all the beaches, Ocean Drive, all those things. But there is a community that is underserved, that's not tapped into, that has a huge problem going on that we're not getting enough attention around, and that's the gun violence. So when you go to so many different neighborhoods that's not so far from Miami Beach, like Opa-locka, Overtown, Liberty City, Goose, Pirine, there's so many cities I can name that really has community of gun violence that's happening. So I really wanted to show that there is a different side to Miami, and it does deserve the awareness. And there is a problem that we need to start paying more attention to. And really the goal behind that was, how do we generate the resources? And then aside from the resources, that's one step. But the second step is how do we get our community to tap into those resources? What's the next step? So Miami is beautiful, but there is a side of it that is ugly, to be transparent with you. Even from a kid's perspective, there's a stat, and this is a dated stat, so forgive me, but this stat was in 2017, and it showed that over the decade that over 316 kids were killed due to gun violence in Miami. So there is a side that definitely needs more awareness around.
Now, I'm curious to know, did you face any adversity or any pushback when creating this film? Because I think a lot of times when we want to shine light on a part of, any community, any neighborhood that isn't, putting the best foot forward or showing people like, the pretty side, sometimes people feel offended, or they feel maybe they just feel a certain way about showing, a neighborhood in a certain light. So, did you receive any pushback or any negative feedback in regard to that?
Yeah, definitely. a lot of negative pushback, a lot of negative feedback, which I had already prepared my mind. Most of it just stemmed from people not having that experience of Miami. They were used to the Miami that's illustrated on the screens. You know, people who live on South Beach who never experienced gun violence or had no awareness of it. So a lot of them, you know, made comments like, that is not my city. You're putting on a bad image for the city. So it was a lot of people that didn't agree with that side of it. And then a lot of people who just kind of went to the route of saying, like, this happens everywhere. Why are you making it seem like it's a case that only happens in Miami? So, you know, the people who doesn't feel like it happened in their city, it's exactly who the film is for, to bring that awareness to them, to let them see what's going on. And then the positive side to that, the people that didn't know, that did see this film, they were taken back by it, and they learned so many things. And, you know, it helped them to look at things differently, have a different perspective. So definitely some negative feedback and pushback, but overall, I would say it was way more positive than negative, and that was satisfying for us.
Yeah, I wanted to highlight some of the positive because I think that if you ever want any problem or any issue that is facing so many people, you have to, you know, direct it head on. You know, what are some positives or what are some of the benefits of highlighting, you know, situations like this? I know that anything with gun violence is a sensitive topic for many people, but, you know, throughout your journey and throughout this entire experience, what were some positive things that you kind of maybe learned about, you know, your city, maybe yourself, and then the overall experience of creating this film?
Good question. I would say you have to take it back to the beginning for me to truly answer this question. When we first did Take a Ride, we started filming in 2016, and we had a version that was already printed. And the version just really highlighted the problem. It didn't highlight the solution. And then, you know, Alex and myself, who was also the co-founder, geared up with some powerful people who had great vision that really helped us take it to where it needed to be. Shout out to Guillermo and Fran, and Michelle as well. But with that, you know, they said, why don't we put you as the main character? I was just trying to be behind the scenes. So I really learned from myself that, you know, I had been through that background. I had been through those type of situations. I've been involved with gun violence. And when you look at me now, I came on the other side of it. So the positive of that was being able to share my story and show what some things that you can do to be a solution. So the kids that's in the neighborhoods that look like me, that talk like me, who may not be as polished, you know, there is a good side if you continue to follow through and don't become a product of your environment. So, like, that was the most positive one, to be able to use my personal story. And then also just how I'm navigating now. Like, despite the challenges that I told you that happened with my brother, you know, it's still a mission to make sure that this goes through. And then the other positive side of it was just really seeing how the city took to it, the ones that were happy with the product that was created. So, you know, that's what I draw from it, the positives.
And, you know, I want to talk about representation because in your answer you just mentioned that, like, you know, you were able to show yourself as somebody who got out of this. And, you know, you don't have to have necessarily a certain background to kind of escape your circumstances. And I think that is so important for a lot of people to see. Can you just talk about the importance of representation and, you know, ways that you ensure that diverse voices within Miami's communities were accurately represented in this documentary?
Definitely. So with the different voices, we were able to get different perspectives of it. And we were very intentional in doing that. We didn't just want one race. We didn't just want one age group. Really wanted to get perspective from everywhere. And that's just so we can be able to learn differently and have a perspective. I always have a quote of saying, you know, we don't argue to win, we argue for perspective. And that's what this film is. It's an argument around gun violence along with awareness and getting different perspectives. So we were able to get the young kids that's going through it right now. We had people who was a little bit older that had been through it. You have someone that you introduced on the film as Level, who was one of the most dangerous guys in Miami, and just kind of talked about why that occurred. You have people that's in today's generation saying why the gun violence exists. And then you have community activists that talks about what some things that can be done. So really going around and highlighting different perspectives on this important topic was key. And it also let the audience know that we're not one-sided. We weren't having an agenda of trying to bring certain policy changes. The biggest thing was just really bringing awareness around this topic, and whichever side you may lay on, I feel like we provided perspectives that could help the user either kind of agree with the perspective or to gain a new perspective that they hadn't thought about before versus just being biased.
Now, what's next for you as a filmmaker, especially with this series? Because earlier you mentioned that people said this happens all over the place, right? And I think that, regardless of how you look at it, there's so many ways that you can kind of, I guess, highlight this issue. So, what is next for you? Do you plan to explore different parts of the U.S. and how this affects everyone? Or, do you want to focus in on other aspects of Miami?
That's a good question. I have so many different avenues. To be honest with you, I haven't made it up, but I'll let you know the different avenues that I'm considering. The first one and foremost is really to create more awareness around this scene. We feel like it got to a good audience group, but would definitely love more people to check it out. So that would definitely be the first mission in all the options. I've considered staying in Miami and, doing another film that just really gears more towards the kids violence that's happening with gun violence, because there's a lot of cases. And my film, while it does cover gun violence within kids, I feel like there's some layers there that we can kind of peel back to go a little bit more deeper. So that's what I've considered, staying in Miami and just attacking it from that standpoint. Or the second avenue is exactly what you said, going around the country, hitting up some people prior to we get there that want to tell their stories, and being able to do that. I'm sorry, I had a light that go went out. So sorry about that, but being able to do that.
And I like the title "Take a Ride" because it kind of like invites people to go to places. I've never been to Miami, and just looking at it, I feel like it kind of like opens the car door and just kind of lets people kind of, just get a taste of another world and see what life is like for another person that kind of like, we all share the same country, but, we go through very similar but also very different experiences. And so I think that you could take this idea so far. I'm so glad that you were able to share it with us. I just want to know, what do you hope that other people watching will get, or, what do you hope that they will take away when they watch the film?
One is just the awareness of gun violence and what it's doing to our country, and more importantly, what it's doing to our kids. I think we really need to start talking to our kids more about gun violence. So I really hope they take that away. Number two, there's light at the end of the tunnel. For the kid that's out there who's in an environment that has so much adversity or traumatic experiences through his life that just really like he can't do anything further. I hope he draws inspiration from my story and be able to know that there's light at the end of the tunnel and know that they control their own destiny. And then three, I just encourage you to go into your community and kind of learn what's going on there. And while I do plan to get to other people's cities, I hope this inspires them to look deeper into their community and to be able to make an impact.
And now for my last question, because we only have like maybe 2 minutes left, can you just quickly, highlight the importance of like filmmakers and people with a platform kind of addressing social issues?
Yeah, it's very important. I definitely think in today's society, given today's tools and resources, there's so many things that draw up our generation in. When you think about Instagram, Reels. So, it doesn't have to be a full movie. It doesn't have to be 1 hour and 15 like we did it. It doesn't have to be 2 hours. There are some Reels that's 1 minute and 30 seconds that can be so impactful to someone, and it'll actually catch the attention of someone because, the attention span isn't as great for a lot of people. So I would just say, how do you use your platforms, whether it's Instagram, whether it's Twitter, whether it's your phone, using an app that you can put some things together to really give a powerful message and really leverage your platform and your following to do something powerful with the social issues that this company faces. So it doesn't have to be a documentary, but a reel or whatever you can do to really get some things out there, that'd be great. And then the last thing I would say with that is just the consistency of it. There's going to be times where you feel defeated, you're not going to want to go forward, or you may come across some barriers, but just really think about what's more important at hand and how many lives you could be saving or helping.
Well, I want to thank you so much for joining us and, sharing a little bit about your life, in this amazing film that you made with our community to talk a little bit more about your community. So thank you so much for sharing that with us.
Thank you. I really appreciate you guys having me. It was a blast.
Thank you. We have to take a quick break. We'll be back right after this.
I remember when the Bronx did not really have a media outlet properly representing the people of the Bronx.
BronxNet provides for the community by being a community where people can be empowered to share their voices.
We are in a really great place technologically. We've got all the resources that we need to be effective.
Whether it's through cameras, storytelling, editing, we have provided those services for 30 years.
BronxNet's mission is to be a voice for the community.
To educate, to inform, and to inspire.
And you can be a part of it. We've built studios for you.
BronxNet is a wonderful place because it inspires people that want to consider a career in film and television. It's a way to come, learn, it's cost effective, and it's a way to actualize your dreams.
Welcome back. The New York Women's Foundation works to bring economic security to end gender-based violence and provide health access and reproductive justice to all women and girls. With fierce determination, they mobilize hearts, minds, and resources to create an equitable and just future for New York City women, families, and communities. Here now joining me is the Senior Vice President Program of the New York Women's Foundation, Camille Emeagwali. Camille, thank you so much for joining me.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Now, can you talk a little bit more about the New York Women's Foundation and how, the organization has a unique philanthropic approach in engaging in early and trusting in women-led strategies? I'm curious to know, how does this approach contribute to the lasting change and progress within these communities as well?
Thanks for the question, and excited to be here and representing the New York Women's Foundation. We've been in existence since 1987. And in that time have partnered with so many hundreds of volunteers who've been a part of our participatory grant-making process, in which they partner with us to read proposals, engage in site visits, and be a part of the decision-making process for investing in grants in communities all throughout New York City and beyond. And we see this as the unique value that the New York Women's Foundation has, that we have close proximity to the communities that we invest in, but that we also engage women and girls and gender expansive people in our grant making process.
Now, what I think is so important, and you kind of touched on it a little bit, is that the foundation emphasizes inclusivity, which is very important in this work because, as we all know, not every woman or gender expansive person goes through the same experience, and we need to look at those experiences to adequately help and support these people. Can you share some specific examples of initiatives that showcase the commitment to diversity and inclusivity?
Absolutely. One of our signature investments is through our fund for girls, young women, and gender expansive youth of color. It's been a fund that's been in existence for close to 8 years. And it's been a fund that not only is inclusive of girls and young women, but those along the gender expansive spectrum, including gender non-binary, gender non-conforming. And when we also talk about women, we're talking not only cisgender women, but transgender women as well. We see the experience that women and those who've experienced oppression because of their gender as one in which we want to invest and support and promote their economic security, their health and their safety, and their healing and their justice and well-being.
Now, the foundation practices participatory grant making where guidance comes directly from communities. How does this approach empower local communities, and can you highlight a project that has particularly benefited from this model?
Absolutely. Participatory grant making is ingrained in the foundation of this organization. Since inception in 1987, we've employed this process where we have not only women from community, but women who also support the foundation who are at the table to advance our thinking and thinking about how we can ensure that the mission, vision, and values of the foundation are advanced through our grant making. And so I would say, even from the early beginnings, through our early investment grant making strategy, where we seek to support small grassroots organizations with very small budgets that are really building their capacity and really at the beginning stages of advancing their work, this has been critical. Having folks from community be a part of that process has allowed us to select and invest in organizations that have become transformative in their community. And through a 5-year investment, they're then able to go on, grow, and be able to access funding from other funders because they've established a base of sustainability.
Now, the foundation manages several funding collaboratives. Could you elaborate on the impact of these collaboratives, such as the Justice Initiative and Collaborative Fund, and how do they address systemic issues?
Absolutely. One of the great things about having a collaborative fund is that it's not only the New York Women's Foundation that it's investing their grant dollars in supporting community-based organization, but we're also partnering with other foundations who are bringing their dollars to the foundation where we house and manage those dollars to invest collectively. And so it's an opportunity for us to partner with other funders to dig deeper and give more dollars to, in the case of Justice Fund, ending mass incarceration of women and girls. We also know that through the Justice Fund, we're able to support the women who are most impacted by the criminal justice and carceral system when they have loved ones who are incarcerated and are home and trying to continue to support their communities, support their families. And so through this Justice Fund, we're able to pool those dollars to give more money to organizations and leaders who are really seeking to have other solutions that don't include incarceration as the only way to address issues around justice in our community.
Now, the foundation also supported POW-HER New York, contributing to significant policy wins related to equal pay. How does the foundation work with organizations to achieve tangible policy changes, and what is the broader impact on economic justice?
Well, what's incredible about so many of the organizations that we support, like POW-HER, is that they recognize that it's not only around providing support services or direct services to women and communities, but they also recognize the transformation that advocacy can have on a local, state, and national level. POW-HER has been an incredible force in New York State. And what they've done is build a network and community of women-led organizations around the state to fight for paid leave, equal pay, fighting for advocacy and safety around gender-based violence issues, because we all know that all issues are gender issues, are women's issues. And so what POW-HER does is create this space to build power in community by building that network of organizations leading that fight. And so we recognize that while it is also important to provide those direct services and support that, we know that where systematic change happens is through advocacy on policy on a state and local level.
Now, the organization also played a key role in funding the National Domestic Workers Alliance in its early stages. How has the organization evolved, and what lessons can be drawn from this success in organizing care workers?
So again, another key example of an issue that impacts us all, but particularly women who are still in roles as caregivers, not only for children, but for elders in their life or a sick loved one in their life, where they're often in the position of providing care, as well as those who are operating in roles as care workers, who we know are primarily women, many of them immigrant women, who are often working at lower wages and long hours. And so we've seen the transformation in having support and focusing on a Bill of Rights that supports care workers in their workspaces, but also outlining the needs of those who require support and making sure that they are getting what they need in those situations. So we see that as an example that can be offered in a variety of different issue areas where there's a collective action that takes place and folks are moving forward through advocacy. And the role that philanthropy can play in investing in those leaders and those movements that are happening and moving forward.
Now, something that you mentioned that I want to highlight is you briefly mentioned women from immigrant backgrounds, and throughout the conversation we talked about how there have been initiatives or funds for young girls and women of color. Can you talk about the importance of intersectionality in a lot of the work that the organization does? Because I think that for a lot of women of color or girls of color, sometimes when we hear just anything for women, sometimes we have an automatic image in our head, and sometimes that image doesn't include, us or what we look like. So can you talk about the importance of intersectionality and how your organization strives to kind of make sure that they're upholding that idea and kind of like including others in their work?
Great question. I think when we think about a woman's life, it is not just centered on their gender, but all facets of their identity that intersect and that may create opportunities or in some cases barriers to their advancement that may impact their health and in some cases may impact their safety. And so when we think about a woman and all of the identities that she holds, whether it's race or ethnicity, immigration status, age, disability, those are things that we take into account and recognize that can impact a woman's ability to be secure, to be able to support her health and well-being. And so when we are putting out resources to communities, we are taking that into account. And so many of the organizations, I would say close to 80% of the groups that we fund are either led by or supporting communities that are women of color, immigrant women, because quite frankly, that's the reality of New York City, that there's a plethora of diversity of the experiences that they hold that impact their lives. So what the New York Women's Foundation does is take that into account and understand how that impacts the needs, life experiences, and the resources and supports, and quite frankly, the solutions that can support them in their economic security and their overall well-being.
And I like that you said solutions, because I think that ideally we want to, although in a perfect world you would love to solve every problem, unfortunately that isn't the reality, that it is solution-based and oriented, and not keeping marginalized communities kind of on a hamster wheel of trying to, maybe just get what they can for now and then kind of have to repeat. And so I think that is so important, and I'm really glad that we were able to have this conversation. Now, what I really want to know is how does the organization find other organizations, maybe local-based organizations to kind of collaborate with? And what is some of the things that you look for?
Excellent question. So we are an organization that has great proximity to the ground. We know that problems and solutions exist in the same place. So we're often looking on a local community neighborhood level for organizations that should be in our portfolio. Oftentimes, our existing grantee partners are connecting us to leaders and organizations that also need additional support. We have a legacy of over 37 years of being early investors and catalytic investors in small community-based organizations. We do also have an open and transparent process where we have a plethora of ways that we are going into community and partnering with other small organizations to make sure that the word is out about the resources that are available. What we're looking for are women and gender expansive led organizations that are close to the ground and have great proximity to community, and organizations that need the kinds of support that the foundation has that can be transformative. We want to invest in organizational sustainability, the leadership of the organization, and so that they have access to not only our grant dollars, but amplifying their work through our communications channels, connecting them with other funders, and giving them the platform to get to the next level which could be just even growing the work that they do, scaling that, or simply just getting better at what they do. And so we look for all opportunities to be in proximity with community, because we recognize that the partnership that we can offer can advance them in manifesting the mission that they have for community change.
I also want to highlight that the foundation also works with community organizations that support people or women with disabilities, because I think that is also very important when we're talking about representation and inclusivity. Can you just talk about how the foundation champions pretty much that cause and promotes disability inclusion within their philanthropy?
Absolutely. And I think it goes back to your question around intersectionality. We understand that women and gender expansive people also may have disability as part of who they are and a part of their identity and impacting their lives in every different way, whether through employment or access to services, health, and other resources that they need. And so the foundation has been deepening in its investment in disability, particularly by investing in women's leadership, investing most recently in a landscape scan report that we did that examined what are the needs of young women of color here in New York State around disability justice issues. And through that have been able to grow our investments in support to people with disabilities on a range of disabilities, from physical disabilities, mental health disabilities, most recently long COVID, and really discovered that our work is investing in the leaders of these movements who want support to really bring the needs of people with disabilities to the forefront. We're also part of a table with other funders who are also growing their investment in this work as well. And I think what we bring to this issue is thinking not only about people with disabilities, but women with disabilities, women of color with disabilities, and all of the added issues or needs or life experiences that should be taken into account when we're investing more deeply in transforming the systems that impact their ability to thrive.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And these are things that I love to hear, because I think it's showing that as a society we are evolving and kind of listening to the stories of other people and understanding what their needs may be, and how, as women and people, we're very complex and we have different identities. So I love to hear that. Now, what are some future goals and aspirations for the foundation?
The foundation is really excited to continue to deepen its investment in women and girls in a variety of areas, but most importantly this year in civic engagement and strengthening democracy. We know that 2024 will be a transformational year as it relates to a national election that may have implications on a state and local level. So we want to make sure that folks are engaged, they're getting out to vote, they're thinking about running for office. Women and girls should be in roles of leadership and engaged in political and civic life. We also know that it's still trying times as it relates to the economic security needs of women and girls. And so we're continuing to invest on a local level, both particularly in the Bronx and in Brooklyn, and investing in leaders who are at the forefront of economic and climate justice issues. And so those issues are at the forefront of our investments. And we hope to partner with other organizations throughout New York City and state. We're seeking to advance that for women and girls as well.
Well, I want to thank you so much for joining us and sharing a little bit about the work that the foundation does. We only got to talk about it a little bit, but I'm sure there's so much more that the organization does. So, I appreciate you taking the time to speak with us and educate our community.
Absolutely. It was a pleasure to speak with you. Look forward to doing it again.
Thank you.
All right, take care.
We have to take a quick break. We'll be back right after this.
Happy anniversary to BronxNet, 30 years. Wow, brings back so many memories. This exact studio that I'm in right now, I broadcast out of here. This must have been around 2003. I mean, time flies by so quickly. I started out here, it was either Mr. Gary Axelbank and Mr. Batch with Lady Morsar. We used to do a show here called In the Neighborhood. And I brought so many different guests on this show. To be able to bring your voice to the community is very powerful. To bring hip hop and spirituality, I brought my pastor in this same studio, Pastor Gino Jennings, and I'm sure you guys know who Pastor Gino Jennings is. That's rough. And some disciplined teaching. BronxNet is something that we need to uplift our communities, because this is a platform that we can come, and if you have a vision that's in your mind going into your heart, you can use it to do uplifting things for your community.
Welcome back. Her Justice supports women in poverty in New York City by enlisting and guiding volunteer lawyers to offer free legal assistance, addressing both individual and systemic legal challenges. In November, they unveiled their latest policy report, sharing crucial stories and data shedding light on the current workings of the U.S. immigration and civil justice systems. Here now joining me is the Director of Immigration Practice at Her Justice, Susanna Saul. Susanna, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure.
Now, can you provide an overview of Her Justice's mission and its role in supporting women living in poverty in New York City?
Yes, so Her Justice stands with women living in poverty in New York City by providing free legal services through a pro bono first model. And the areas of practice that we focus on are family law, matrimonial law, and immigration.
Now, how does the Her Justice pro bono first model work, and how does it address both individual and systemic legal barriers for women?
Sure. So we know that there are not enough free legal service providers in New York City to meet the demand of low-income individuals who need free legal services to navigate the very complex legal systems that impact their lives. So what Her Justice does is partner with pro bono attorneys at large law firms in New York City who are volunteering to take on full representation for clients who cannot afford attorneys in very complex legal matters.
Can you share some key insights from the policy report, stories from immigrant survivors of gender-based violence, the impact of work authorization?
Yes, I'd be happy to. So we knew from representing clients, we have over 30 years of experience working with immigrant survivors of gender-based violence. That's the population of immigrants that we work primarily with. We knew that from working with them, that the moment in the legal process where they received their work permit was a pivotal moment in their life. We knew that it made the prospect of self-sufficiency, of economic stability for themselves and their children real, because that is the moment that they're able to enter the workforce, get a social security number, get a stable job. We knew this anecdotally, but we wanted to obtain qualitative and quantitative data in a methodical way. So we conducted a survey in which we interviewed extensively our clients about the impact of having employment authorization on their lives. And we did find more than we thought was a huge impact. So for example, before they had work permits, the weekly earnings of our clients were about $200 a week. After they got a work permit, it rose to an average of $500 a week. The working conditions that they experienced before they got a work permit involved a lot of instances of discrimination, harassment. They got abused at work. There were no sick days off, no days off to care for sick children, which we know is a huge issue. And after they got their work permits, they reported that they were treated as fairly as other workers who also had the legal right to work. There was no abuse, there was no harassment. They could have insurance, they could have sick time. We also noticed that the housing conditions were hugely impacted by having work permits. Before they had work permits, they reported being in unsafe environments, overcrowded housing, in environments that made them feel sometimes sick. And then after they were able to get their work permit, because they had average increases in their weekly earnings, they were able to move into safe environments, more stable housing. And they felt just overall a lack of empowerment before they had their work permits. They felt like they couldn't make decisions for their family. They didn't feel comfortable accessing public benefits or other types of services like hospitals, the police. After they got their work permits, they felt that they could access these very critical public services, and they felt that they belonged here. And so they felt that they had a huge psychological benefit as a result also of having a work permit.
Now, after listening to these stories and creating the report, were there any critical recommendations towards, just any changes in policies or just, making policies to further support and ensure that these immigrant survivors felt a little bit more safe or a little bit more confident, in work and other areas of their daily lives?
Yes, absolutely. So the most important takeaway is really that we think that work permits should be issued very quickly in the journey towards legal status. So currently, issuance of work permits can vary. The quickest that our clients have seen work permits could be 6 to 9 months. But there are other cases, and I won't get into the legal technicalities, but there are other cases where there are commonly delays of up to sometimes years before they can get a work permit. And so we believe that swift issuance of work permits is really a huge benefit towards undocumented immigrant survivors of gender-based violence getting to a place of safety and stability, which is really the whole purpose of certain forms of immigration relief that is specifically geared towards survivors of gender-based violence. So in some ways, because of the delays of issuances of work permits, the entire purpose of these forms of relief is undermined. So we think that the swift issuance, no more than 6 months of work permits, should be an implementable policy and practice. We also think that this should be legislatively enacted. So even though USCIS, the Immigration Service, could potentially do this on their own, we think it needs to be a legislative change because we think there needs to be accountability for this, and it should endure in the future no matter who is in charge of the immigration system. It should be codified in legislation. We think that there should be appropriate funding so that adjudicators can grant these work permits more swiftly. We think that there should basically be more dedication to community outreach to improve awareness around immigration remedies and around what a work permit is and some of the protections that exist even for workers who don't have work permits. We also have recommendations for some New York State policymakers about things that we think would go a long way towards making sure that undocumented immigrant survivors have access to safety and stability.
Now, there's a long-standing issue in New York's legal system regarding the needs of undocumented immigrants. Can you elaborate on the challenges that the legal system currently poses for immigrants, both recent arrivals and long-term residents?
There are so many obstacles in the legal system. So one of the biggest challenges is that the legal system is incredibly complicated. So somebody who is just arriving in this country, or even somebody who's been here for a very long time, to even understand what the immigration system is and the potential possible pathways to lawful status, there needs to be access to a qualified, licensed immigration attorney or an immigration expert who knows how to navigate those minefields and labyrinths of laws. Currently, there aren't enough legal services providers who can provide that kind of navigation, that kind of representation and guidance for free.
Now, what short-term solutions are being proposed or implemented to address the immediate needs of migrants arriving to New York City?
So I think New York City has done a lot to try to address the gaps in legal services. There have been programs to expand access to solid, qualified, and expert immigration legal advice. but there still is a long way to go. We still have waiting lists of people who can't access lawyers. And just to give you a sense of why, immigration cases are just incredibly complicated and they last for a really long time. So a single lawyer can't really take on a lot of cases.
And I'm really glad that you mentioned that. I think for a lot of people on the outside looking in, don't realize like how large the entire system is and how many moving components are a part of it. Can you kind of just detail, I guess, for those who may not understand, how your organization steps in and kind of, assists people on this journey that, as you mentioned, could possibly take even years to kind of face?
Yes. So we partner with community-based organizations who have access to people in communities all over New York City. We rely on our partners, on caseworkers, on community advocates, sometimes on elected officials' offices to sort of get people in the community who need help to understand that there are places, there are organizations who can help them for free. And there's also a big barrier of trust because a lot of people don't want to talk about their immigration situation. They are ashamed. They are made to feel like they are outsiders and they don't belong. And so even just talking to somebody about their immigration status can take a huge act of trust. And so we rely on our advocates in communities who have built that trust with people who can tell them, hey, look, we know that it's scary to talk about this stuff, but there are organizations out there that can help you.
Now, I'm curious to know that because the organization focuses primarily on women, how do you address women with children and some of the unique challenges that may come about when you are dealing with somebody who has a family?
So many complications. Low-income families in New York City are facing so many obstacles, and sometimes the legal case isn't even the priority for them, right? So housing crises, food insecurity, changes in public benefits post-COVID, right? Because the Medicaid rules changed and people don't know how to navigate that to even get adequate health care, go to a doctor. So that's another reason why we partner with advocates. We can take care of the legal piece and we really focus on the legal piece. And so when we partner with advocates in communities, social workers, caseworkers, then we can really have a collaborative effort to address lots of obstacles in the lives of families and women so that the legal case can also be addressed as part of a comprehensive sort of plan for the holistic well-being of a family.
Now, you mentioned advocates and the role that they play in kind of building that trust with the community and helping the organization kind of reach that mission. What are some of the qualities or some of the things that the organization looks for in these advocates, and how do they find these people who have already built that trust or who may have been already doing the work prior to kind of like collaborate with the organization?
It's such a good question. I mean, partnerships are built over a really long period of time. We try to do outreach presentations. We try to, let people know on social media about our services. But many of the relationships we have just come about over the years of just knowing each other, being in the same spaces, going to conferences together. Sometimes we work in the same organizations, and as our careers change, we keep in touch with each other, but we're always looking for new advocates to partner with as well.
And I like to hear that because it sounds like, the saying, it takes a village. It is showing that it's more than just paperwork because we're dealing with a lot of people's livelihoods. And it's showing that, at least I like to hear that it is a sense of community, and that even if you've moved on or done other things, that that community is still kind of there. And I think it's so important in this work. Do you have any maybe experiences that you may have been a part of or that you've seen that kind of really show how that community the community that the organization builds has actually really helped members of the community that you're serving?
So it does take a village, 100%. I agree with you. And it takes a lot of work from lots of different people in lots of different ways. So, for example, one thing that happens in the lives of many of our clients is that when a client comes to us from a community organization, we pair them with a pro bono lawyer who starts working with them on their immigration case. And that relationship becomes very close over time. And so the client often will trust the lawyer with things that maybe she's never told anybody else in her life. And then the lawyer can then come back to us and say, hey, this is not really part of her legal case, but here she's dealing with an eviction, or she doesn't have health insurance, or she got a letter saying her health insurance is going to be cut off. Then we have connections with many other advocates doing many other types of law or casework. And so then we can reach back out to those organizations and make sure to get that the client gets the help she needs with those other areas of her life.
Now, how can collaboration with organizations like Her Justice and other advocacy groups enhance the effectiveness of policies aimed at resolving the migrant crisis?
Well, I think that what we've come to call the migrant crisis isn't a crisis with people, it is a crisis with systems. So the more that we can really engage with each other, talk about the issues, talk about the obstacles, gather data, gather research, and lift it up to decision makers on the city, state, and national level, the more we can uplift the voices of people who otherwise would be too ashamed or too scared to talk about the issues they're facing. And when we can uplift those issues relentlessly, continuously, then we can start to make some change in the systems.
Now, where can people go to learn more, whether they either want to collaborate or maybe they're doing similar work? And also, where can people who may need these services go to kind of look for that and utilize them?
Go to our website, herjustice.org. We're also at social media, Her Justice, on Instagram, and reach out. There's lots of different portals on the website, depending on what you're looking for, to reach out. I will say that sometimes one of the biggest challenges is our capacity, right? We only have a finite number of people working, and there are so many people that need help, and we're pulled in a lot of different directions. So please just be patient with us if we can't get back to you based on your question. Please have patience and faith that we will get to you. We will not forget about you, but sometimes we just can't do things exactly when we want to.
Understood. Well, I want to thank you so much for joining us and sharing some of the very, very important work that your organization is doing. Just throughout my time learning about this, there is a need for, these services, and I can understand how the organization is doing the most that they can to assist as many people as possible. So even you being here right now and kind of having this discussion is truly appreciated. So thank you so much.
I appreciate your attention and interest in this issue, and thank you so much for your wonderful questions.
We've come to the end of our show today. We hope you enjoyed this week's discussion on the Bronx Social Justice and Anti-Violence Forums. To rewatch this week's edition, you can catch the Recable cast right here on BronxNet.org. If you want to join the conversation and present your point of view, you can visit our social media at BronxNet TV. Join us next week as we continue to elevate the discussion and bring further awareness across the globe. I'm your host, Kibin. Take care.